On March 4th, 1836, delegates of the Independence Convention appointed Sam Houston Major General and instructed him to organize the Republic's military forces. They had earlier received Travis's letters from the Alamo pleading for reinforcements. One faction, led by the Nacogdoches representative Robert Potter, called for the convention to adjourn and for all to rush to the aid of the besieged Bayer garrison. Houston slammed the scheme as madness. Delegates would do better, he insisted, to remain in Washington and draft a constitution for the new nation whose existence they had just proclaimed. As for the Alamo defenders, he pledged all mortal power to save them. Accompanied by his aides-de-camp, Houston departed Washington on the evening of March 6. He had no way of knowing, of course, that the Alamo had fallen that morning. What Houston discovered when he arrived in Gonzales on March 11th did nothing to boost his confidence. On February 11th, Alamo commander James Clinton Neal had gone on furlough to care for his ailing family. He left William Barrett Travis in temporary command of the garrison until his return. But on February 23rd, Santana arrived and besieged the Alamo. Consequently, Neal could not make his way back to assume command. He did, however, raise a relief column of some 374 men in Gonzales, men who became the core of Houston's San Jacinto army. Soon after Houston's appearance, two Bejarinos, under Juan Seguin's command, galloped into the town with news that the Alamo had fallen. Houston had little reason to doubt their report, but was fearful of the panic it might generate. He therefore arrested the two couriers as spies. While he publicly disparaged their information, the general privately admitted in a letter to Colonel James Walker Fannin that he feared that a melancholy portion of it will be found too true. Houston immediately dispatched orders to Fannin in Goliad to blow up the Presidio La Bahia and fall back to Victoria with all possible haste. Houston knew he could not defend Gonzales with 374 untrained volunteers, and thus made plans to retire to the Colorado River, where he intended to rendezvous with Fannin's command. He had no inkling what was going on further south. In Goliad, Fannin commanded more than 400 troops, the largest Texian unit under arms, inside the Presidio La Bahia, which the Texians renamed Fort Defiance. On February 13th, Mexican General Jose de Urrea began a lightning march toward San Patricio, en route ultimately to Refugio, Goliad, Victoria, and Brazoria to gain control of crucial Texas ports. Fannin learned of the enemy's advance, but even then dispatched units to Refugio to evacuate Texian settlers, only to have Urrea's sweeping juggernaut swallow them up. The Goliad garrison finally abandoned Fort Defiance on the morning of March 19th, bound for Victoria. Fannin even stopped at midday to rest. Captain Jack Shackelford inquired why he would halt on an open prairie devoid of all natural cover. Fannin replied that the Mexicans would never attack a corps as large as his. Yet soon afterwards, Urrea's cavalry appeared in hot pursuit. Fannin ordered his men to head for a slight rise, but an ammunition wagon broke down. The rebels had no choice but to form a square formation around the stricken wagon and stand their ground. Urrea's cavalry kept the rebels pinned in place while his infantry moved forward to engage. During the subsequent Battle of Coleto Creek, the Texians fought bravely throughout the afternoon and into the evening. That night, they dug entrenchments and suffered from thirst. Dawn on March 20th revealed that Urrea had received reinforcements during the night. Now armed with a howitzer, Mexican artillerymen could stand beyond rifle range and blast the rebel square to red ruin. If the Texians broke their formation and ran for cover, Urrea's lancers stood ready to ride them down. Realizing the hopelessness of his situation, Fannin surrendered. Urrea marched the defeated Texians back to the Presidio La Bahia. Few of the prisoners would now have had the heart to call it Fort Defiance. For a week, Mexican soldiers held Fannin's men in close confinement. During that time, the captive rebels, especially the wounded, suffered terribly. General Urrea continued his campaign, leaving Lieutenant Colonel Jose Nicolas de la Portilla in command at La Bahia. It proved a doleful assignment. On March 26, Portilla received direct orders from Santana to execute all of his prisoners. Later that same day, a countermanding order arrived from Urrea. In a quandary, Portilla concluded that he had no choice but to follow the instructions of the Supreme Commander. The following day, Palm Sunday, March 27, 1836, Mexican soldiers led between 425 and 445 Texian prisoners out of the fort. They marched in 3 columns between 2 rows of Mexican soldiers. The prisoners were in high spirits, enjoying the fresh air for the first time in a week. They also believed that they were traveling to the coast, where they would board ships to return them to the United States. Yet, when the 3 groups had marched about a mile from the Presidio, their guards halted the column and opened fire at point-blank range. Charles B. Shane, one of the prisoners who escaped the carnage, later recounted,
"They were within 3 or 4 feet of us when they fired.
Soldados finished off those not immediately killed by musket fire with bayonets, lances, and butcher knives. 40 prisoners were wounded so badly they could not march out with the others. Captain Carolino Huerta oversaw the murder of these helpless men. Since Mexicans required trained physicians, he spared Captain Jack Shackelford. Portilla also concocted reasons to spare numerous Texians who practiced useful occupations, mechanics, carpenters, and the like. Fannin was the last to face death, knowing that most of his command had preceded him on their final journey. Mexican soldiers placed him in a chair in consideration of his painful leg wound received at the Battle of Coleto Creek. As a final request, Fannin asked that the officer commanding the firing squad send his personal possessions to his family, that the firing party aim for his heart, and that his body should receive a Christian burial. The soldados pocketed his belongings, shot him in the face, and tossed his body on a common funeral pyre. 28 men escaped what Texans would forever recall as the Goliad Massacre. But some 342 others fell victim to Santana's malice. He could have acted with discretion, but chose otherwise. He would have done better to dump an army of defeated and demoralized volunteers on U.S. shores. Their tales of Mexican compassion and Texian neglect might have dissuaded others from flocking to join the conflict. He could have gained the high moral ground. Instead, the world came to view him as a bloodthirsty butcher. Fannin and his men, moreover, joined the Alamo garrison as martyrs whose blood called out for vengeance. Sam Houston's ragged soldiers, all that remained of the Texian army, were eager to answer that call.